The majestic fountain corner of the Long Beach Street Circuit has been a fixture of the course since 1999. But until today, no one has crashed into the fountain. And while he didn't quite make it to the water, I would like to congratulate Jack Harvey. 20 years of trying, and somebody finally ended up in the fountain at Long Beach. So welcome to the Long Beach Review, and yes, indeed, it's a Puma hat video, so you know what's coming if you're a fan of the channel, and if you're not, stay tuned. Buckle your seatbelts. I'd like to give a shout out, first and foremost, to my old pals over at NBC. Good job, NBC. I'm really happy that the second largest crown jewel in the IndyCar schedule was not put on the network NBC, rather shoved to cable. What for? Well, apparently, what got the priority was figure skating, and not just figure skating, because I could understand if it was a live broadcast, but apparently it was tape delayed. So, is this a new low for getting bumped off of network TV? Might just be. Pretty embarrassing for all involved, I have to say. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. Take it what you will. Yeah, bad TV scheduling, but I've mentioned that 100 times. So let's move on. Spoiler alert, we're going to talk about Alexander Rossi. If you don't know why we're talking about Alexander Rossi, go and watch the race. But if you do, he absolutely spanked the field. And that's why I'm going to start off by talking about Alexander Rossi. Because there are going to be some people out there who really didn't like this race because Alexander Rossi absolutely destroyed the field. I mean, it wasn't even close. Put it to you this way. I woke up I didn't even wake up. I stayed up till 2 in the morning to watch Formula One, and that went all the way till something like 4 a.m. My time. And the gap between the two Mercedes, which are a lot of people point to as being so dominant that they make Formula One unwatchable, the gap between Valtteri Bottas and the eventual winner of the race, Lewis Hamilton, never exceeded, I think it was like 10 seconds. I don't think it was ever longer than 10 seconds. Alexander Rossi won this race, the the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach. Write that one up in the comments. But he won this race by a whopping 20 seconds over Joseph Newgarden. Keep in mind that unlike Formula One, Alexander Rossi theoretically, well, I guess at the least he had 4 other cars in the race that were exactly the same as his. Those being the 3 other drivers from Andretti Autosport, as well as Colton Herta for the feeder team Harding Steinbrenner. At the very most, if you look at just simply Dallara Hondas, there was half the field that had theoretically the same car that Alexander Rossi had. And yet, the gap between the whole field and Rossi, 20 seconds. I want to put that in perspective, and I want to highlight that as a positive rather than a negative. And it's not just because I like Alexander Rossi, and no, I'm not shilling for IndyCar based on what I just said at the beginning of this thing. I think you need to have races like this, and I may lose some people here. It's not a bad thing to have a driver every now and then put on a monster performance like Alexander Rossi has done, especially at marquee major events. I understand everybody wants it to be the 98 Long Beach race where there was 3 lead changes in the last 5 laps, and Alex Zanardi in that race came from 3rd to 1st. I get it. Everybody wants that every race. But having a race like this, and I'm actually going to make a golf comparison here. And I know I was making fun of golf over the weekend because everybody was excited about the Masters, and everybody's going to excuse whatever lousy TV rating IndyCar gets is on the Masters. But when a sport has a Tiger Woods, somebody who, even though he didn't really dominate the Masters, or I think it was a pretty close finish as well in the Masters, but when you have a Tiger Woods who was at one point so dominant in golf that it was like Tiger versus the field, and a lot of times Tiger was so far ahead of everybody else that it wasn't even close. And yet, Tiger Woods was the guy who really helped move golf up into the stratosphere as a sport, or at least bring it back up there after some lean years. Now, I'm not saying that Alexander Rossi is Tiger Woods. There are much more factors that led into Tiger Woods becoming a huge star than just he was dominant at golf. But sports always need dominant figures. They need drivers who stand out from the rest of the crowd, drivers who absolutely the common fan, the common man can point to and say he's the best. And if a driver, any driver from the field, can beat that driver, go faster than him, outqualify him, then you can point to that driver who has beaten an Alexander Rossi as being elite level, or at least having a career day. So when you look at Alexander Rossi doing stuff like this, and he's done it a few times before, we've seen it at Mid-Ohio last year, Long Beach again last year, and this race was even more dominant than that one, believe it or not. Do these sort of things. I don't look at it as a negative. I get that the race wasn't very entertaining, but it was entertaining enough in my mind that it kept me interested. And quite frankly, it's kind of fun. And again, it's probably because I like to watch Rossi. I like to watch greatness. I like to watch a guy who is absolutely merciless. He's not there to entertain anybody. I hate to break it to you. He's there to win the GD and race. And that's exactly the type of racing driver I like. It's the type of racing driver that built the sport. No matter where you look at it, you look at Ayrton Senna or Richard Petty or Mario or AJ. These type of drivers, they would have days like this. I mean, it wasn't, but 20 years ago that you'd have guys winning by a full lap, not just 20 seconds. And those of you who always like to point out how many cars are on the lead lap, there's still 11 cars on the lead lap at the end of this one, so I don't know. It's just amazing. I really love seeing performances like this. If every race was like it, I understand that it would get tedious and boring and what have you. But this happens so rarely that I think we should appreciate the greatness. And Alexander Rossi, in my mind, is not only one of the greats of this time, but he has the potential to become one of the greats of all time. In fact, I think I titled the video last year about Alexander Rossi, "Is he the next Mario?" referencing a Road and Track article that was written in 2013, believe it or not. And I'm starting, the more and more time passes that Alexander Rossi is doing things like this, that Road and Track article is looking like an incredibly prophetic piece of journalism. And I think Marshall Pruitt wrote it. I don't know if he wrote the headline, but boy, oh boy, Marshall, did you nail it if you got there from that. So, yeah, Rossi, amazing. So let's talk about the rest of the race, because pretty much this whole race was a lot of Rossi and not a whole lot of anything else. The start of the race was really the only time we saw Scott Dixon challenge, or anybody for that matter, really challenge Rossi legitimately. It was outside moves, couldn't make the pass. But the thing that we all kind of have always wondered, and certainly if you've played a video game with Long Beach in it, you've either tried or seen some crazy shenanigans happen in the fountain, or at least said, can I make it into the fountain, crash into the fountain? Well, it happened. You can say it's Ericsson's fault this time, F1 fans, because it was. Unfortunately, there wasn't a great replay, but the point was that Jack Harvey ended up in the bushes just past or just away from the fountain water. Maybe someday somebody will actually get into the water-driven style, but it hasn't happened yet. This is the closest I think anybody, and that's including some of the support races and Grand Am and some of the terrible series that have tried to race at Long Beach and crashed all the time. This was the first time I think a car has ever ended up. I'm more than willing to be corrected if I'm wrong. Frisky Nixon, if you're going to put together a compilation of cars crashing into the weeds over there, I'd love to see it. But I think this was the first time anybody has actually crashed into the fountain area, actually gotten over the curb. So then we move on to the restart. Again, it was another Rossi-Dixon fight, and Rossi won out again and just started pulling away. And we never saw the yellow again the rest of the race, though we'll talk about the potential of yellows coming out a bit later. We saw a great battle between Colton Herta and Patricio O'Ward, and boy, oh boy, the fact that they stayed side by side from turn one all the way to the fountain turn. I mean, I get that being 19 years old puts you with gives you a lot of bravado. There's a lot of red blood flowing through those veins, so to speak. But I think it also speaks to the talent level of those two drivers. And again, the fact that those two guys, I guess in addition to Alexander Rossi, are absolutely the future of this sport. I mean, there's a ton of talent coming up into IndyCar. It's going to be a lot of fun to see those guys with the same experience level as Rossi racing up there at the front. Then the pit sequence really began. And the pit sequence was one of those things where I was so worried that Rossi and the rest of the guys who were up at the front were going to get caught out on the caution lottery that we've seen the last couple of races. It looked like it was going to happen at one point with Santino Ferrucci spinning down into the runoff area. Thankfully, IndyCar Race Control did not throw a caution on that one. There's a complimentary thing for them. Put that in the bank for later because they're going to need it. But we saw lots of overcuts and undercuts in this race, or at least attempts. We didn't see a whole lot of it being successful. The one team that really pulled it off, and it was really only in the first stint, was Team Penske, who got Joseph Newgarden and Will Power out in front of Scott Dixon. Unfortunately, Scott Dixon kind of outfoxed Will Power just a little bit, and Power went off into the runoff area and kind of ruined his race a little bit. Unfortunately, we had some good things to say about Colton Herta. Unfortunately, we have to talk about a bad thing now. Just a little too hard going down into turn 9, smacked the wall, and destroyed the hopes and dreams of all in attendance at the Long Beach Grand Prix, because there was a potential, if Colton won, that they were all going to get free tacos from his sponsor. It didn't turn out that way. So, once you get to the end of the race, we get to talk about that gap again. This is kind of unprecedented in this era of IndyCar racing. Everything is so close. There's so many parts spec on the car. You don't see guys gain such an advantage of 20 seconds towards the end of the race as you did see with Alexander Rossi, but it happened. And, yeah, if this was NASCAR, they would be tearing that car. They'd be taking that back to the NASCAR Technical Institute and ripping that thing apart, looking for any cheating going on there, any windows falling down. But, yeah, Alexander Rossi won the race, way out ahead of everybody, but we weren't without excitement, drama, and controversy at the end of the race, because Scott Dixon and Graham Rahal, who had managed to work their way up into third position, or the battle for third, got a little heated. Graham Rahal threw a block on Scott Dixon, even admitted it was a block, and Dixon faded, couldn't get around him. And Race Control, even though Rahal was the first one across the line, determined that Graham had violated IndyCar's blocking rule, which we'll get into in just a second, demoted Rahal from third to fourth in the race, and they got it wrong. Yep, Race Control got this wrong. Thumbs down on that one. Here's why. Graham actually, here's the thing. IndyCar has had a bit of a loophole in their rules. They don't explicitly ban blocking. They do have a rule against blocking, but it's only if it is reactionary, meaning if a driver has moved, so let's say the cars are lined up. If a driver B, here's driver A, driver B moves out and driver A moves in front of him, that's a block. But if driver A predicts that driver B is heading this direction, if driver A moves first, that's not a penalty. So what I saw in Long Beach was Graham Rahal moving and Scott Dixon moving behind him. Yes, it was quite a chop from Graham Rahal, but as far as I'm concerned, it was a legal move. It was within the rules to do so. And, I don't want to put the tinfoil hat on because I've already got the Puma hat on. But, we've everybody's pointed this out, that we see a lot of these calls go Scott Dixon's way. I don't know if it's coincidence or whether there's maybe a little bit of favoritism up there, but we see a lot of the calls go his way. And if it was any other driver, would this call be made? Who knows? Now, granted, Scott Dixon, of course, is the winningest active driver. He is the master. He is the guy with probably the greatest understanding of the rule book. So I guess if Scott Dixon is making those complaints on the radio, I would suppose that Race Control would probably be more interested in listening to him than if this block had been made on Santino Ferrucci. Here's the other problem. What if they had been racing for the win? Would IndyCar have been willing to take the win away from Graham Rahal if this situation, let's say this situation happens at the Indy Grand Prix, which is the next race. Let's say you got the same two drivers in the same position, same thing happens. Graham Rahal comes across the line first, Dixon in second, but IndyCar determines that Rahal has blocked. Will they, or made it an illegal block? I've got to make that known because blocking is legal. You get one move and you can't be reactionary. It's very simple. If he makes an illegal block, would they take a win away? I don't know. That's a question. That's a question that only IndyCar can answer. But I'm sure you've put your own answers down in the comments, and if you haven't already, be sure to do so. That was Long Beach. We now head on to the month of May in Indianapolis, and as you guys know who are regulars on this channel, going to have a ton of coverage. Indy 500 month is one of the pillars of this channel, and I'm hoping to deliver a lot of incredible content. I can't wait for you to see some of it as we're heading into the greatest month of the year, as far as I am concerned, the month of May. So, thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. Subscribe if you want more motorsport or IndyCar, and especially in this next month, Indy 500 content. I will see you in the next video.